Have you ever found yourself in the middle of a storm of your own life, and asked yourself a question that feels both impossibly large and desperately simple? How do I stay standing? Not just how do I survive, but how do I find a sense of stillness, of centeredness, when the winds of chaos are threatening to tear everything apart? It's a question that hums beneath the surface of modern life. We feel it when a deadline looms, when a difficult conversation waits, when the news feed delivers yet another dose of global anxiety. We feel it in the quiet moments late at night, when the day's distractions have faded and the deep uncertainties of our lives come rushing in. We are told to be resilient, to be strong, to hustle harder and control our destinies. But so often, that advice feels like being told to simply build a stronger wall in the face of a hurricane. We white-knuckle our way through life, believing that if we can just manage every variable, control every outcome, and anticipate every threat, we will finally achieve a state of peace. But it's an exhausting, fragile peace, isn't it? One unexpected phone call, one piece of bad feedback, one relationship that splinters, and the walls we so carefully constructed come crumbling down, leaving us exposed and wondering why we are so utterly incapable of holding it all together. This universal struggle, this chasm between the calm we crave and the chaos we experience, became the singular obsession of a woman named Emma Lewis. She wasn't a guru or philosopher to begin with. She was someone who had built her entire identity on the illusion of control, only to watch it disintegrate in the most spectacular fashion. Her journey, chronicled in her breathtakingly honest book, Unshakable Calm, is not about finding a magic bullet or a 7-step hack to happiness. It's a detective story, a deeply human investigation into the very nature of our inner world, and a quest to find an anchor in a world that seems determined to set us adrift. To understand the profoundness of what Emma Lewis discovered, you first have to understand the world she came from, the world she had so masterfully built. On the surface, Emma was the epitome of success. She was a high-stakes corporate negotiator, one of those people who lived in the rarefied air of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. Her job was, in a word, control. She controlled the flow of information. She controlled the emotional temperature of a room. She controlled the narrative. Her colleagues admired her, calling her ice, unflappable, a rock. She wore these labels like armor, believing they were a testament to her strength. Her life was a meticulously curated spreadsheet of achievements. The promotions, the bonuses, the sleek apartment with a panoramic view of the city. Every element was a testament to her ability to impose her will upon the world. But beneath that placid, controlled surface, a frantic energy was burning through her reserves. Her internal monologue was a relentless cycle of risk assessment and worst-case scenario planning. She wasn't calm. She was just exceptionally good at suppressing her panic. Sleep was a luxury, punctuated by 3 a.m. wake-up calls from her own anxious mind, replaying conversations and pre-gaming future conflicts. Her relationships were managed, not nurtured. She saw people, even those she loved, as variables to be accounted for, their emotions as potential disruptions to her carefully laid plans. She was the architect of a beautiful but hollow fortress. And then the storm hit. It wasn't one single event, but a cascade failure, the way a collapsing bridge takes out one support column after another. A career-defining deal she had spent a year structuring fell apart at the 11th hour due to a market shift she couldn't possibly have predicted. The external validation she relied on vanished overnight, replaced with whispers of failure. At the same time, her partner, exhausted by her emotional distance and constant need for control, finally walked away, telling her, "I feel like a contingency plan in your life, not a person." And to complete the trifecta, a routine checkup revealed a health issue, nothing life-threatening, but serious enough to shatter her illusion of invincibility. The rock had crumbled. The ice had melted. In the span of a few weeks, all the pillars of her identity, her career, her relationship, her health, were gone. She was left in the rubble, staring at the profound, terrifying truth. She had never been in control at all. It was all a desperate, exhausting illusion. This was her ground zero. The pain wasn't just in the loss. It was in the complete disintegration of her sense of self. If she wasn't the unflappable negotiator, the woman in control, then who was she? It was from this place of absolute desperation that her real journey began, not to reclaim her old life, but to find an answer to a much deeper question. Is it possible to find a true, lasting calm that doesn't depend on everything going according to plan? Her quest began not in self-help aisles, but in a place of raw curiosity. Stripped of her old certainties, she started to investigate the very nature of stability. She read ancient philosophy, studied the neurology of stress, but the concepts felt abstract, disconnected from the visceral reality of her own anxiety. The first real crack of light came from an entirely unexpected source. Following a lead, she found herself interviewing a veteran deep-sea saturation diver, a man who had spent more of his life under the crushing pressure of the ocean than on dry land. She asked him how he dealt with the fear, the claustrophobia, the absolute darkness, the knowledge that a single equipment failure meant certain death. She expected to hear about mental fortitude, about compartmentalization, about control. His answer changed the course of her life. He explained that the single biggest mistake a new diver can make is trying to fight the ocean. You can't control the currents, you can't push back against the pressure, and you can't will the water to be still. Trying to do so is a recipe for exhaustion and panic. The secret, he said, wasn't in controlling the external environment, but in mastering one's own internal state. The key was buoyancy. By meticulously managing his own breath and the gas mixture in his suit, he could achieve a state of neutral buoyancy, where he neither sank nor rose, but hovered, weightless. He became his own center of gravity. The powerful currents could still move him, but they couldn't crush him or pull him down. He was anchored to himself. This was a thunderclap moment for Emma. She called this discovery the fallacy of the fixed point. She realized her entire life had been a frantic search for external fixed points, a job title, a bank balance, a relationship status, to anchor herself to in the turbulent ocean of life. But these things are, by their very nature, impermanent and unstable. They are like anchors dropped onto a shifting seabed. When they inevitably get swept away, we feel like we are drowning. The diver's wisdom offered a radical alternative. What if the anchor wasn't something outside of us, but something within us? This led her to a case study she explored in her book. A CEO named Marcus who had built a tech empire from scratch. Marcus was a brilliant strategist, but he was obsessed with control. He micromanaged every department, insisted on approving every minor decision, and lived in a state of perpetual fear that the market would turn against him. And eventually, it did. A disruptive new technology made his company's product obsolete almost overnight. His company, his fixed point, collapsed. Marcus lost everything and fell into a deep depression. He had anchored his entire identity to his creation, and without it, he felt he was nothing. It was only through years of painful self-reflection that he made a discovery similar to Emma's. He began to rebuild his life not around a new company, but around a set of core values he had long neglected: integrity, curiosity, and a desire to mentor others. These became his new anchor, his internal source of buoyancy. He started a small consulting firm, helping young entrepreneurs navigate the chaotic startup world. His new venture was a fraction of the size of his old empire, but for the first time in his life, Marcus felt a deep, abiding sense of calm. He was no longer trying to control the ocean. He was teaching others how to navigate it, anchored to something real and lasting within themselves. Armed with this powerful first principle, the necessity of an internal anchor, Emma began to feel a sense of hope for the first time since her life had fallen apart. She started the difficult work of identifying her own internal anchor, excavating the values and principles that lay buried beneath the rubble of her old identity. She felt a budding sense of stability, a nascent calm that wasn't dependent on her email inbox or her bank account. But then a new, more insidious problem emerged. She found that while she was better equipped to handle the external storms of life, she was still utterly at the mercy of her internal ones. Her own mind had become the hurricane. Even with her newfound internal anchor, she would be ambushed by waves of anxiety, by relentless loops of self-criticism, and by paralyzing what-if scenarios about the future. It felt like a betrayal. She had done the work. She had found her anchor. So why did she still feel so out of control? She was trying to apply the first principle to her own thoughts, trying to control her mind, to force it into a state of calm. She was trying to fight her own thoughts, to push back against her anxiety, And in doing so, she was creating a violent, exhausting civil war within her own head. The more she fought the anxiety, the more powerful it seemed to become. This complication sent her on the second phase of her quest, searching for an answer to an even deeper question. What do you do when the source of the chaos is you? The answer came, once again, from an unexpected place, a small, unassuming dojo where she began observing an Aikido class. She watched as the sensei, an elderly man with a gentle demeanor, moved with an almost impossible grace. When an attacker lunged at him, he didn't block. He didn't meet force with force. Instead, he would blend with the attacker's motion, moving with them, guiding their energy, and using their own momentum to effortlessly bring them to the ground. There was no collision, only a redirection. It was a fluid, powerful dance. After class, she spoke with the sensei, explaining her struggle with her own relentless thoughts. He smiled and said, "Your mind is your attacker. You are trying to block it, but you cannot win by blocking. You must learn to blend." This was Emma's second great breakthrough, the practice of non-resistance. She realized that fighting a thought or an emotion is like blocking a punch. It creates a painful, jarring impact and validates the power of the attack. You are giving the thought reality and strength by struggling against it. Non-resistance, the Aikido of the mind, was a completely different approach. It meant acknowledging the thought's presence without fusing with it. It meant letting the feeling of anxiety arise without immediately trying to annihilate it. It's the practice of saying, hello anxiety, I see you're here, and then allowing it to move through you, without latching on. It doesn't mean you approve of the thought or believe it's true. It simply means you cease the struggle. You stop feeding it the energy of your resistance. She writes about an artist she interviewed, a painter named Chloe who was suffering from a crippling creative block that had lasted for over 2 years. The block wasn't a lack of ideas. It was a profound fear of failure. Every time she approached a canvas, a voice in her head would whisper, "This is going to be terrible. You've lost it." Her response was to fight. She would try to argue with the voice, to force herself to be positive, to push through the fear. But it was like trying to paint in a hurricane. The more she fought, the more paralyzed she became. The breakthrough came when she learned, through therapy, a form of non-resistance. Her new practice was radical. She would sit before her canvas, close her eyes, and invite the fear in, would acknowledge the critical voice. She wouldn't argue with it. She would simply notice it, as if it were a cloud passing in the sky of her mind. Then, with the fear still present, she would pick up her brush and make one small mark, and then another. She wasn't painting in spite of the fear, or after conquering the fear. She was painting with the fear. She had blended with its energy, redirecting it from a paralyzing force into a background noise. Her creativity, slowly at first, and then with a torrential rush, returned. She had stopped blocking the punch, and in doing so had found her flow. For months, Emma practiced these two principles as separate disciplines. She worked on strengthening her internal anchor, her core values, her sense of self-independent of external achievement. And she practiced Aikido for her mind, learning to blend with difficult thoughts and emotions rather than fighting them. Both were powerful. Both were transformative. But she felt they were still two distinct tools in a toolkit. The grand synthesis, the unifying aha moment that forms the core of her book, came to her on a windy afternoon while walking through a park. She was watching the trees in a storm. Some younger, more rigid saplings were being whipped around violently, a few even snapping under the strain. But the old, massive oak trees were a different story. They were moving, certainly. Their branches swayed and their leaves thrashed in the wind. But they were not breaking. And in that moment, she saw it all with a blinding clarity. The two principles weren't separate. They were one single, dynamic system. The deep, sprawling root system of the oak tree, unseen beneath the ground, was its internal anchor. It gave the tree its stability, its connection to the earth, its fundamental strength. This was her first principle. But the tree's survival didn't just depend on its roots. It also depended on the flexibility of its trunk and branches. The tree didn't stand rigid against the wind. It yielded. It bent. It danced with the force of the storm, allowing the energy to pass through it. This was the practice of non-resistance. Her second principle, the tree's resilience, was a perfect synthesis of deep-rootedness and flexible yielding. And then came the profound realization. Unshakable calm is not the rigid stillness of a rock. A rock can be dislodged by a strong enough wave. Unshakable calm is the dynamic, resilient equilibrium of a great tree. She had been searching for a way to stop the storm, to achieve a static, permanent state of peace. But that was never the point. The storm will always come. The wind will always blow. The goal wasn't to build a fortress against the wind, but to become the tree that knows how to bend without breaking, because it is so deeply and securely rooted. The internal anchor gives you the foundation, the knowledge of who you are at your core, so that when the winds of external failure or internal anxiety blow, you are not uprooted. The practice of non-resistance is what allows your branches to sway, to let the energy of those winds move through you without snapping your spirit. It's this beautiful interplay that creates true resilience. It's the understanding that calm is not an absence of motion, but the ability to return to your center again and again with grace and flexibility in the midst of motion. The problem was never the storm. The problem was that we were trying to be rocks when we were born to be trees. So what does this mean for us right now, in the middle of our own lives and our own storms? Emma Lewis's journey from the rubble of her controlled life to the wisdom of the great oak tree provides us not with a simple answer, but with a living blueprint. It's a fundamental shift in perspective. It begins with turning our attention away from controlling the world outside and toward cultivating the world within. The blueprint is a two-part practice. The first is the work of the roots, identifying and strengthening your internal anchor. This is a deep and personal process. It means asking yourself, what do I stand for, independent of my job, my relationship status, or my achievements? What are my core values? What would remain true about me if I lost everything I have? This isn't about finding an affirmation. It's about discovering the bedrock of your own being. The second part is the work of the branches, the daily practice of Aikido for the mind. It's learning to notice your thoughts and feelings without becoming them. When anxiety arises, you don't fight it or flee from it. You simply acknowledge it, breathe, and let it pass through you without resistance. You unhook yourself from the struggle. This isn't a passive surrender. It's an active, skillful, and deeply compassionate way of engaging with your own mind. The journey Emma took is a testament to the fact that you can change your entire relationship with chaos. You can move from a state of brittle control to one of deep-rooted flexibility. But it's not an intellectual exercise. Understanding this is just the first step. The transformation happens in the practice, in the daily commitment to tending to your roots and learning to bend with the wind. It's a skill, and like any skill, it requires patience and dedication. If this journey resonates with you, if you feel that call to move from being a rock to becoming a tree, then I invite you to make a commitment to that practice today. Subscribing to this channel isn't just about watching more videos. It's a declaration. It's a way of saying that you are ready to start the work, to join a community of people who are dedicated to cultivating their own inner resilience. It's a commitment to yourself. Because life will never stop bringing the storm, but within you lies the unshakable calm of the eye.